biggest, boldest, most annoying thing that is going to happen to you once you start telling people that you're sewing is people will be throwing their garments at you left, right and centre. Can you fix this? Can you adapt that? Here's 20p, here's 50 cents. I know you want to do it because you love it. So picture this, if you will. I decided I wanted to take up sewing, so I bought some fabrics, I bought a sewing machine, and in my mind, all I needed to do was put the two together, start sewing, and I would end up with a garment. Oh, how I lived in complete oblivion. I had no idea what was to come on my long journey towards becoming proficient at sewing. Lots and lots of good things happened, and I'll be talking about that in my next video. But some really annoying things happened as well. So in today, I'm going to go over those annoying things that you may or you may not have expected to happen. So the first thing that really annoyed me actually when I started to sew was that I expected to be able to sew in a straight line straight away, and I just wasn't able to do that. I tried and I tried, and no matter how much I tried, I could not sew in a straight line. I remember being sat at the sewing machine trying to sew, or actually I was sewing, just not perfectly, and my lines were wonky, and I was thinking, when I watch other people on YouTube, their lines are straight off the bat. Why are my lines not straight? And at one point I thought I was never ever going to be able to sew in a straight line, and it just wasn't true at all. Most of the time now I can sew in a straight line, but occasionally I can't, and there were a few things that helped me. One thing was to put some washi tape on my sewing machine. I placed the washi tape the distance that I need from the needle to the edge of my fabric, so that would be the seam allowance, and then I sew and keep my eye on the washi tape and not the needle. If you keep your eye on the needle, that's going to be your biggest mistake, because your fabric will go everywhere. Your needle is not moving when it's sewing, apart from going up and down. And so if you're keeping your eye on that, you're not keeping your eye on the fabric, and the fabric will move. Do not keep your eye on the needle. Keep your eye on the edge of the fabric, or the washi tape if you pull it down. I also bought a magnet that I put on my seam allowance, but that magnet did move around a little bit, so I wasn't keen on that. You could put an elastic band around your sewing machine. There's lots and lots of things you can do. Basically, you need a marker where you want the edge of your fabric to be, and then you want to keep your eye on that fabric. Don't give up if you can't sew a straight line. It will come with time. It just takes practice. Something you could do is get a piece of paper, draw lines on it, and sew without any thread in the needle, and then you will see how straight your lines are. And if you do that lots of times, you will get better at it. So the next thing that really annoyed me was the fact that I'm a perfectionist. Well, that didn't annoy me as such. I've lived with that my whole life. The fact that when you're a perfectionist and when you're learning to sew, the two things do not go together. In my mind, they don't. You might disagree. Do let me know down below. But in my mind, they don't go together, because I wanted my garment to be absolutely perfect. How many times, I don't know if this has happened to you, but it's happened to me a number of times. I'm constructing a garment. I get quite far into the garment, and then I'm trying to match two parts where I've already matched other bits with them. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but I hope you're with me. And you go to match them and they don't match. Maybe you're doing a collar or something like that and it just won't match. It can be up to 1 inch out sometimes. And you think, I followed the instructions, I've done everything right. Why, oh why isn't it matching up? And you go back and you measure your pattern pieces against your fabric, it all looks fine. And you sit there and you're scratching your head and you just cannot work out why on earth it is not matching up. I had that with the opium coat. I will leave a link to that video down below, where I had a bit of a disaster with that coat because it wasn't lining up. To this day, I still don't know what I did wrong with that, and that was like nearly 2 years ago. But that comes down to learning to sew and to being accurate in your sewing, which takes time. You're not going to do that overnight. And so if you're a perfectionist, like I tend to be, you're going to beat yourself up when you can't get it to match. That is a very, very good reason why you should do a toile or a muslin, which is a practice run, before you break into your fashion fabrics so that you don't ruin them. That's a great pro tip when you are new to sewing. But before I was making toiles, I got so frustrated and annoyed with my own lack of progress. In my mind, it would all come together, work perfectly, and I'd have a lovely garment at the end. But in my journey learning to sew, my garments weren't spot on all the time. They might have been 1/4 of an inch out, 1/8 of an inch out here, you know, maybe even 1/2 an inch some places. But I still had garments that more or less did fit me, and if they didn't, it was due to fit issues rather than my sewing a straight line or not. So if you are a bit of a perfectionist, try to let go of that if you can, because you will get much further, much quicker in your sewing journey if you're able to do that. So when we look at sewing patterns, they are marketed towards us to be the be-all and end-all to help us achieve a perfect garment. So why, oh why, do they not give me a bespoke, tailored dress when I buy a dress pattern? That was a question that I was asking myself when I was very new to sewing. I went for a long old journey trying to understand the concept that sewing patterns are a template and they need to be adapted in order to fit me. When I started to sew, there were 2 issues with this, and the first one was choosing the right size, because I'd only ever worn ready to wear clothes, so I was a size, for example, say I was a size 20 in ready to wear, I would then make a pattern and choose size 20 in the pattern, and then it didn't fit me, it'd be far too small, and I couldn't work out why. And that is just because ready to wear sizes and pattern sizes have no correlation. Even pattern sizes between different brands and designers, say you've got the big 4 and then you've got the indies, they go on different sizes as well. So you really cannot just choose a size, make it up and hope that it'll fit you perfectly. So what you need to do is you need to take your measurement and then choose a size based on the measurements that it gives in that particular pattern. And then that will be a really good starting point to achieving that tailored dress that you're after, or jacket or trousers or whatever you're making. So once I came to understand that I needed to choose based on my measurements, and I did, I then became frustrated because, well, the patterns still didn't fit me properly. So I might be able to get them on and wear them fairly comfortably. The shoulders might be hanging off my shoulder, or I might have a great big gape in my neckline, or my bicep might be a bit tight where the rest of the dress fitted. The back of my skirts would hike up because of my big booty. All those things are fixable, but in my mind, when I started sewing, I felt that I shouldn't need to change them. I've paid for this pattern, so this pattern will fit me. I had that expectation that it would fit me, and over time I learned that I needed to adapt these patterns. Now that's a whole other education on its own aside from sewing. So learning to sew is one thing, learning to adapt patterns is quite another. It's a long journey, and I'm still on that journey now, but the clothes I make now fit me a lot better than when I started out. So I would say if you're new to sewing, do make sure you understand a sewing pattern is just a template, and you will need to adapt that template. Most people will need some kind of adaptation on every pattern. If you're really lucky, you might find a brand that is super close to your own body measurements, and then they fit without too many adaptations. But for most of us, we will make lots and lots of adaptations. Now, I've got loads and loads of videos on my channel where I go through all the adaptations I make in the different makes that I've made. So if there's anything you want to know, do go back and have a look through my catalogue. So I don't know about you, but when I first wanted to sew, I thought I might save some money by sewing my own clothes. Because if you go in the shops, Garments are quite expensive these days, and I just thought all I've got to do is buy the fabric and make it myself. Because I'm doing the labour myself, it must be cheaper, but actually that could not be further from the truth. So if you factor in the fabric you need, the tools you need, the pattern you need, the notions you need, the time you put into it, it's going to triple compared to what you buy in the shops. However, when you buy something in the shops, it's not necessarily going to fit you. Going back to my last point, they make a template, and that template cannot possibly fit everyone. And so if you make your own clothes, you do get other benefits aside from this. So aside from making the actual garments and saving money, or not, as is the case with the actual individual garments, we need to take into account that most of us do like a stash. You can see my stash there, so guilty as charged, officer. But I'm not alone in this, I know I'm not. And so we keep buying fabrics and patterns, and then we haven't got the time. We buy them because instant gratification, and later on we just lose interest in making them, and it's a lot of money that we spend. But the main point is that we just cannot compete with fast fashion. You can make fairly cheap items depending on the materials that you choose. If you choose a lower end, so a blouse you make may come out cheaper than a blouse that you buy. However, if you think the long term, that cheaper fabric isn't going to last, and you will have to keep buying supplies and making more stuff. So if you buy more expensive fabric, it will come up more expensive, but possibly there might be a saving in the long run. I'm not convinced of that, to be honest. I get so much out of sewing that the cost is something I just bear because it brings enjoyment to me. But it can be really annoying when you get into sewing and then you think, I'm going to save money, and actually you don't. Not unless you go to thrift stores and make your own patterns. So the next annoying thing, at least it was annoying to me, and I don't know if it is to you or not, but however big my sewing space is, it is never big enough. And I guess that's because the accumulation of stuff that I spoke to you about in my last video, which was the smartest things that I've bought. And the video before, which was the dumbest things I've bought. I've just bought all the things, and so no matter how much room I have in a sewing room, I always end up needing more space, and it's a little bit annoying. When I first started to sew, when I bought that IKEA sewing machine, I was sewing on a little table, you know, like those cluster of 3 tables you get, coffee tables. I would be sewing on one of them, and my sewing machine, it was tiny, so it just fit nicely on there. But as I grew into a love of sewing, I started to take over the lounge, and we lived in an apartment that just had a bedroom and a lounge similar to what I've got now, basically. And I was soon taking over the lounge. There was a mannequin in the lounge, sewing machines, and with my chronic health condition, I wasn't putting stuff away, so it was staying out. And so it was taking over the lounge. So when we moved again, we moved into a 2-bedroom, so I could have a spare room for sewing. And so I had a room all to myself, and it was perfect for about 6 months. And then I would think I need an extra table, or I need more chairs, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And the room wasn't big enough. Then I spent the best part of a year trying to convince my husband that actually we should swap that bedroom for the lounge, and then I could use the lounge and the bedroom could become the lounge. He wasn't keen, but eventually I wore him down. And then we went into the lounge for my sewing room, which was twice the size. And in some ways that was too big, but it still wasn't, because there was still not enough room for everything. Because a seamstress is like a fish, if you ask me. It will grow to its environment. If you put it in a little bowl, it will stay a little goldfish. And if you put it in a huge pond, it'll become a big koi. Have you related to that, where you've grown into your space and then you've needed more and more space? I certainly have. And after we were in that 2-bedroom place, we then needed to downsize due to money restrictions. So then we moved here and I have a lounge and a bedroom, as I mentioned earlier, and this is my lounge, and you can see what's happened to my lounge. I will be doing a room tour fairly soon, so you will see the full breadth of it. Let's just say that we haven't got the TV in this room. We've got the TV in the bedroom. And when we move again, which hopefully will be in the next year or so, I will definitely be needing another room. I have to say I have so much respect to those who just sew on their kitchen table and can put everything away afterwards. That's just not me. Illness or not, I am a messy sewer and I take days and days with my sewing, and so it just wouldn't be an option to get it out and put it away afterwards, especially with all the extra bits. I never had this shelf for the longest time, and I just had my fabrics put away in a cupboard, but I never knew what I had, and I was buying more fabric when I didn't need to, and it was #goals to get this shelf. And now I've got my fabrics all displayed, I know at a glance what I've got. It takes over the room a bit, but you will understand that it just makes my heart sing. So I've just got a couple more annoying things that happened when I took up sewing to share with you, but in the meantime, let me know down below what annoying things happened to you when you started sewing. I think this is really helpful to those who are picking it up, not to put them off sewing, because I think it's a fantastic hobby to take up, and I would encourage everyone to do it. And you will hear more about that in my next video, where I talk about all the brilliant things that have happened to me since I started sewing. But let me know down below what annoying things happened to you. The funnier, the better. So let's get into the next thing. So the next thing is family and next door neighbours, unfairly I might say, expecting you to sew within sociable hours. Now I haven't had too much trouble with this because I am very sensitive to other people's needs, and so I don't ever sew outside the hours of about 8 AM to 11 PM. That is my window for sewing. Never had a complaint either from my husband or the neighbours, but I can see that I would do if I sewed all night, and I don't sleep well. As I mentioned in my chronic health video, I have a non-24-hour circadian rhythm, which means I'm often up through the night, and that is an optimum time for me to sew, but I just don't do it because it's not fair on other people. So actually perhaps it's my own expectations rather than the neighbours, but I could see if you've got thin walls and you are sewing with a loud machine, say you were using your serger through the night, that could be a problem. Have you ever had an issue with neighbours complaining about you sewing? I'd be really interested to know that. It might give me a little bit more confidence to sew if no one had ever got a complaint. I would be interested to hear your stories. Biggest, boldest, most annoying thing that is going to happen to you once you start telling people that you're sewing is people will be throwing their garments at you left, right and centre. Can you fix this? Can you adapt that? Here's 20p, here's 50 cents. I know you want to do it because you love it. Picture this, you sat in your office, someone comes up to you and says, I hear you sew, and I've got just the thing that you're going to love doing this weekend. My jeans need taking up. And don't worry, you don't have to thank me. I know you enjoy it. Here they are, if you could bring them in on Monday, because I've got a date night Monday night and I'm going to need them for then. Have you ever had that happen to you? Maybe not specifically that. That specifically hasn't happened to me, but I have had people coming to me. And to be fair, everyone who has come to me has offered to pay, but I always say no. I fixed someone's kids' trousers once as a favour because they've been good to me, but it was a once off and I have not done it since. When I was in a job, I had my manager was saying to me she wanted me to make her a dress. I explained I don't make clothes for other people. She kept on, I really would like you to make me a dress. She wouldn't let it go. I was as clear as I could be that I was not going to do it, but when she wouldn't relent, I gave her a price list. I told her this is how much realistically you're looking at paying me to make you a bespoke dress, handmade, individual, that no one else in the world has ever had or will ever have in the future. What did I hear afterwards? Yeah. And that's your little tip. If you keep getting asked, if you keep getting requests, give them a price list, and you, most cases, 9 out of 10 cases, you won't hear anything else. It's a great little tactic. I just don't get why people think they're doing you a favour. Do they not value your time, your expertise, your tools, everything? If you are happy to fix people's stuff, by all means, go ahead. But I'd say be really careful, because if people hear that you're happy to do that, you'll get more and more requests. And I think if you offer to do something, that's one thing. But I think for people to expect to do it and think they're doing you a favour because you enjoy sewing, that's something else altogether. Anyway, that's the annoying things that have happened to me since I've started sewing. I would really, really love to hear all your stories down below. I bet you've got some funny stories to tell. I will have another one which will be all about the positives that have happened since I started sewing next. So stay tuned for that. So if you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, do hit that subscribe button down below. Check out my Ko-fi account if you'd like to support me further. Give me a like and a comment downstairs, down there. And I will see you in the next one. Until next time, happy sewing. Bye for now.